doesn't like you, sorry. I don't like you either. Have we used that one before?
No, I like it. Hello, welcome to the Weekly Song Podcast. My name's Roger Heathers. With me, as always, is my co-host, Declan Kitchener. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Bit of a eventful drive, but other than that, fine.
Well, you're here and you're in one piece.
Yeah, Roger got treated to like the full 15-minute accounts, blow by blow, of just the mind-numbing boredom of the drive down this week. Basically, I couldn't listen to my own music, and the traffic was crawled to a standstill, so I had to listen to Classic FM the whole way down.
Declan hates classical music.
I like classical music. I just hate snobby presenters who go, "Yes, you're so cultural for listening to classical music, aren't you?"
Yeah, it's not the station I'd readily choose, but
music's lovely. Just people are not.
The people not so much, huh?
Yeah. And we've lost all of our listeners already.
Welcome to the Weekly Song Podcast. For those of you who are regular listeners, welcome back. For those of you who are new, we write a song each in a week, and we come to the podcast and we talk to each other about them. Last week we had the brilliant Sammy Jonas on with us. Woo! And this week it's just Declan and I. And we're recording a little later in the week, just to peek behind the curtain, so this feels a little odd for us. So now, at this point, we have 3 days each to write finish our next song.
Yeah, basically, we normally try and record Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday kind of time, and have the show out on Friday.
Yeah.
We're recording on a Friday.
The show's still going to be out on a Friday, so if you're hearing this today, this is literally earlier today that we were doing this.
Yes, right up to the minute topical news.
I can't think of a single thing that's happened today in real life.
Yeah, nothing today.
Nothing today, but stay tuned. You never know what's going to come in.
Nuclear war might start halfway through the podcast, and then once nuclear war has started, you'll be able to have a glimpse at the last moments before we all got nuked to oblivion.
On with the show.
Nice and cheery start there.
We record for 3 minutes and we're already on nuclear oblivion.
We've had a new person at work this week. He's worked in our store before, but just end of the first day, he said, "Oh, why is there so many things to do?" And I just go, "Because life loves you. It knows that your time on Earth is short and you're going to die eventually, so it's giving you meaningless little jobs to do to keep yourself busy." He just goes, "Bit bleak, innit?" I don't know.
I never should have come back to this store.
Yeah, I say it how I see it.
So, I think I'm first this week, aren't I? Song playing wise.
Please, God, may it be a ray of sunshine after last week was like a counselling session. A lovely counselling session. It's a lovely episode. It was quite fun.
It's cathartic.
But yeah, it just ended up being like, we're all miserable. We're all terrible people.
My song that I wrote in a week, I'll tell the kind of odd, way I wrote the song after I play it, but it's called I'm Gonna Miss You.
Aww.
I know.
It's so sweet.
Right, this is my song that I wrote in a week, and it's called I'm Gonna Miss You, and it goes like this. I'm gonna miss you when you go. Oh, at this point it is nearly inevitable. Sometimes I give myself the luxury of assuming you're going to stay with us forever. I'm gonna miss you when you go. The replacement they found is a pale imitation of you. He doesn't care about my weaknesses and does nothing to foster my strength like you. Step out in the road if you stress. We can make them second guess our whole routine. He's gonna miss you when you go. I'm at a point where the novelty's faded away. I sit and contemplate the argument for the faults and the choices you made. Where would we be without your recklessness? It's a hell of a life that you made with us together. There we go. Woo! Whoa.
I really quite like that.
Thank you.
Just one little thing I do love in particular, and this is going to work really well visually. But just for clarification here, Roger's 2 down to D, I'm in standard. So there's one point in the verse where like you've got your E chord, your A chord, and you got to a B, but it looks like you're just holding the G, D, and B strings. Mm-hmm. And that bit, I always think once you've hammered on to that E, you're gonna go to a C sharp minor. So it visually it's a little sleight of hand, if that's possible in a songwriting format. But I really like that. What I really love about the chords this week is that the chords are mostly diatonic in the verse. You've got a minor 4, which is one of our favourite tricks, and you've got a major 3rd.
Yeah.
But that's like they're both common tricks that don't sound out of place in a diatonic sequence. And then once you get to the chorus, it really helps it sound separate because you're using a few more unusual placements of chords and things. It's just really nicely constructed.
Yes. Yeah. It's I had the idea to have a much more simplistic approach to the chords this week, sort of because of the surroundings I was in. I've just come back, literally last night, from visiting my brother in Wales, who's just had a daughter, and so we stayed with him for a week, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to write my song in a week, and that's the week while I'm away, so I was like, okay, I'll bring a guitar, but I bought this tiny little blue toy guitar.
Is it one of those ones you have to like tune 4 semitones higher or something?
Not exactly. It can be in standard, but it's ropey at the best of times. It's that one. Podcast listeners, I'm sure you can see what I'm pointing at. It's like a blue, like, 1/2 or 3/4 scale guitar, and it's like...
Well, I think technically my one here is 3/4 scale. So I would argue that comparison from my 3/4 to his, I'd argue it's a 1/2 scale.
Yeah, so I bought that up with me, and it's fine to play, but that's all I had. So usually I have an option. I don't know. It feels like you have less options because the fretboard's a lot smaller, so it's much easier to just sort of play your open chords and stuff,
Yeah, like it gets a bit crowded when you have to try and do like complex inversions and things.
Yeah. So I was in no position to be writing like complicated riffs or like stuff up the neck particularly. So I was like, okay, I'll have a more simplistic approach to this song. And I had been listening, and I still am. I'm obsessed with this one song at the moment called Fish and Whistle by John Prine.
I've been thinking lately about the people I meet, the car wash on the corner and the hole in the street, the way my ankles hurt with shoes on my feet, and I'm wondering if I'm gonna see tomorrow. Father, forgive us for what we must do. You forgive us, we'll forgive you. We'll forgive each other till we both turn blue. Then we'll whistle and go fishing in heaven.
I must admit, I haven't heard that one before.
It's I hadn't heard it before this week, but it's a really simplistic, like, I don't want to say country, but it uses like those country chords, 1-4-5 and all that stuff. So it's a very simplistic song. I was like, that's a really cool way to approach a song. And you know me, and we're both the same. We like to put something a little bit more unusual in every song we write, just to sort of try and bring something interesting to the podcast,
Yeah, you try and tell us to write a song with one chord in it, and we'll probably try and find ways around it.
Yeah, exactly. So I stole a chord from my dad, because my
tut, naughty.
But I'll
call the chord police.
Please don't.
That could be a title.
Yeah. So I went to Wales with my dad to visit my brother, and my dad plays guitar as well, and he was playing this piece he's kind of writing. He's been writing for a little while, and he wrote this new part, and I thought it was a really interesting change that happened. I'll play it as best I can that I can remember it, but it's a particular chord he went to as part of the scale. So he wrote it in A. I'm tuned down, but for sake of argument, let's say I'm playing in A. So this is the piece. And that's kind of like as far as he got with it. But then I mean, I was kind of playing it. We'd like swap the guitar back and forth and see what we could do with that piece of music. And he came up with pretty much all of it. But one thing I liked is that when he goes to the B shape, he's not playing the traditional bar chord of B, right? He's playing up here, so that he's actually got another note on the E string up there, and then he can hit the B when he wants to.
So it's like it's the top of a G shape, essentially, if you consider like the best way to explain this for listeners is if you imagine playing an open G, you shift that up and use your finger to bar where the open strings would be at any point, take off E and A, and then you've got that one there. It's a shape I quite like using for solos because it quite easily matches in with the A shape and the G shape. It gives you a lot of freedom of movement around there.
Absolutely. I always think of that shape as like what you call it? I always think of it as like an A, like you got the open A chord, and so moving it up. And then I had never really played with it.
They're one and the same essentially. Like they're just the A's on the physically further away side, and the G's on the physically closer to the body side. That's
good way of putting it. So anyway, I was playing with those suspensions, and then in the bridge part or whatever, he goes up to a D7, and then the song, for sake of argument, is in A major, right? But he goes to this A flat 7 chord, so it's like a semitone down from the root, and I was like, wow, that's a really cool thing to do. And I've seen the what is normally the diminished chord in a major scale diatonically been used as a major before, a major 7 or a 7 chord. But I hadn't really explored it very much, and I thought it was just a really interesting thing, and it just kind of it caught my ear. And I thought when I was writing mine, I would try and do something similar. So my song's in E, so in the bridge part of my song, I thought I'd go from the 4A to the flattened root, but make it a 7. Same exact thing as what my dad did with his piece of music.
Because then that really invites you to go up to your root.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I just thought that was such a cool thing. We've been writing songs for a while now. When you come across a technique that you haven't really seen used very much before, it's exciting. You go, oh wow, cool, there's like a new avenue to explore.
It's one of those breakthrough moments where you're mucking around, you try something, you think, I never knew that it could do that. It's like you say, like when you write something cool into a song, it's like, look what I've discovered music can do.
Yeah, totally.
We should have that on a t-shirt at some point.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Would you like to buy t-shirts with the silly things we say on them?
No!
How?
So, I mean, that was kind of like the only really interesting chord part of it. And then the rest of it, I thought if I'm going to write something simple, I want to write something more heartfelt, I guess you could say. And something a little bit more honest. So I just wrote lyrics from the perspective of, and again, I said to you this before, this series, if I get stuck on what to write, I'll kind of go to write from my perspective as a little boy, or my perspective as an older man, or that sort of thing. And
I was going to ask about the shifting perspective, because you start verse you start the first one with like "I'm gonna miss you," and then it moves to "He's gonna miss you." So I wondered whether that was two characters on the side of a conversation, or whether that was two perspectives from the same person or something. If that makes sense. Which you were about to explain, and I interrupted just to try and be like, "I'm clever. I noticed stuff."
No, not at all. That actually helps my point. Helps me articulate my point. Obviously, I don't kind of want to get into like who each verse is about, but that's kind of the point in a sense. Because I like the idea of it being an open-ended thing for whoever's listening to it to put their own person into the narrative, you know, their own self or their own whoever.
Yeah, it can be multiple people, it can be one person, you know, it can have several different meanings.
I think Kurt Cobain once said, you know, just because I write I in a song, it doesn't mean I'm referring to myself. And I think that's something that stuck with me. In terms of like
not every song is a literal translation of the precise innermost workings of your head. It can just be how you feel one afternoon or how you imagine someone to feel.
Yeah, and that's an exciting thing about songwriting in a way. It's like I find it really interesting and exciting to play with those I's and he and we and she and they, because like it's up to the listener to decide. They could draw some assumptions about me for listening to the lyrics, and that's fine. That's their prerogative.
Because in most things you write, there will be a grain of truth, even if it's like the grain of truth is you oppose the view that you're writing, and you're writing it ironically.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's a grain of truth in that you despise this sentiment. Like, it does mean something to you. It means something negative, or like, you know, this isn't the state of how things were, but I wish they could be, or something like that. This is kind of like, everyone makes such a big deal about Bohemian Rhapsody. Everyone goes like, what's it about? It all means so much stuff. I just think like Freddie Mercury probably just made most of it up because it sounded good.
Yeah.
There's probably like there is an emotional meaning to it, but there's probably not like a literal one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I find
if you can create lyrics that just have emotional meaning, if they've got a literal meaning, that's fantastic as well, but they only need to be emotional.
Yeah, I find Bohemian Rhapsody to be a particularly interesting one because it is such an emotional song. I think a lot of people have been really moved by it. And it's exciting and it's sad and it's melancholy and all.
And it's comedic as well in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all these things. And I think it's a really good illustration of why I like music. Because the reason I liked music in the first place is because it made me feel something when I was a teenager. You know, I could resonate with it. But that wasn't because of the words I was listening to most of the time. It's because of good riffs, or, you know, what I'd learn later because of good chord progressions or something like that. And Bohemian Rhapsody is a wonderfully melodic song with great chords and great riffs and great production. And the words kind of really don't matter, to me anyway, you know. That's obviously subjective.
We're always making this argument. We're musicians, we're not poets.
Yeah.
If we can write fantastic poetry, great. But, you know, at the end of the day, we just like making cool noises.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that I think that's why I've settled on music as probably my favorite, you know, way to be creative or whatever, express yourself, is because it can be so open-ended. Like, you can write a song about anything, and people can think it's about you. They can think it's about them. It's so subjective. And
well, to take something like Harry Nilsson's album, famous one, Nilsson Schmilsson. You've got, I know he didn't write it, but you've got emotional, heartfelt things like Without You, or Driving Along, or Early in the Morning.
Yeah.
Which has got particular emotion to it. But then you've also got comedy songs on there, like the Coconut Song. That's, you know, like the sheer magnificence of music is that it is just so broad. You can do like a little comedy skit 1 minute, and then you can break someone's heart the next. You can do that in any medium, but music can do that to you in an instant.
Absolutely, and I think the great thing with music is that there's not such demand for narrative as there would be in a book or a film, or paintings can be abstract, but in a sense they're more on the more abstract end of the spectrum, whereas films and books are on the more literal, and music is somewhere in the middle, but it can be abstract, and I think that's what's so cool about it.
Yeah, there's no need to find meaning. Like, in most paintings, because it's entirely visual, you'll be looking for representations of things. You'll be looking for meaning in the images, even if it's just like paint splattered onto a canvas. You'll try and find meaning as to why the paint has been splattered on the canvas. Was the artist having a bad day or something, or is this meant to represent some shit or other? Whereas with music, you can literally just do things for a laugh,
Yeah.
and it's fine.
Well, I think that goes for painting as well. I think a lot of paintings, I mean, obviously people prescribe meaning to paintings, but I think a lot of paintings are just people, it's pure expression. It's people just going, paint at a thing, you know, and that's fine. That's a good thing. But with music, that it's like a great balance between emotional resonance and narrative, and also craft. There's craft. You can't just like...
Passion versus structure, essentially.
Yeah, and a good song to me is like something that balances that heavy emotion with, you know, years of craft. Like people go with the Beatles, like they go, oh, Beatles were on drugs, you know, that's why they wrote all these LSD hallucinations.
Well,
and
they were never on Beatles. Never on Beatles. They were never on drugs in the studio, though.
Right, exactly. And also the other thing is, yes, they took drugs at points. You know,
There are songs about drugs, like She Said, but it's written from, you know, a sober man's perspective of being high.
Yeah.
And how disorientating it is. John Lennon didn't take LSD and then sit down and just going, she said, I know what it's like to be dead.
I mean, what I was going to say is that like they had years of writing, you know, and that honing their craft and like becoming good craftsmen, and then, you know, the psychedelics were introduced, and that maybe, you know,
it affected their songwriting, definitely.
Yeah, but they had songwriting to be affected, you know, by, you know.
I mean, this is kind of the argument I always make. I love the later Beatles stuff. I'm a later Beatles fan. Everything from Rubber Soul onwards is nearly perfection for me, apart from White Album, but I've vented my thoughts about that in other places. But you wouldn't get that stuff if they weren't masters of writing pop songs.
Yeah.
Because the early years are pop songs.
Yeah.
But they are some of the most well-written pop songs you'll find.
Yeah, I agree.
We are literally living up to our mission statement of just like rambling about the Beatles now.
But it's like, I think if you're... obviously, it's so subjective, and it depends what kind of music you fancy making, and that's everyone's own prerogative, so whatever. But for me, if I was going to start songwriting now, I would probably want to go towards pop music, you know, mainstream pop music, rather than psychedelic, like, Grateful Dead type of music. Because although the Grateful Dead type of music is trippy and it's colourful and everything, it doesn't have the structure and the craft that like ABBA does. And I think you kind of need that if you want to later on go to the psychedelic route.
Well, this is kind of there's this great interview with Frank Turner, which I think I've shown you before, where he's talking about his songwriting with another podcast, and he says something about, oh, you can have all this trippy stuff. You can say, oh, my song's written in 12/9 and it's in this mode and this stuff like that. And he just says, well, my answer to that will be, fine. I still don't like it, though.
Right, yeah.
Like, you know, you can't just be trippy and weird and things like that for the sake of it. That can't just be your end goal. This is like the whole thing I have... When I have problems with metal bands is when they all do drop D riffs and they try and be harder than everyone else, for, you know, just for the sake of being harder than everyone else.
Yeah.
Like, we're the heaviest band who existed. Cool. Do you have any good songs?
Yeah.
Because if the answer's no, then you need to think about what you're doing. That goes for every form of music. I'm not just saying that about metal. Like, every form of music has that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's got to be something... There's got to be some substance to it, basically.
Yeah.
There's got to be a backbone of actual songwriting to a thing.
Which is, it's a good test when you go back to, like, being diatonic and just sticking in one key scale mostly, and, you know, trying to simplify things. Can you still write an enduring melody?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in a way, music is a meritocracy in the sense that the most enduring and timeless stuff is largely, there are exceptions, largely the best written stuff, the people who have explored, because it's like learning anything. You learn a skill set when you write songs. You learn that, oh, these chords seem to sound good, I wonder why, and then there's like a kind of this theory behind it of why it does. I wonder if you can go outside of the scale, and I'm not saying you have to be like that, but I think the best songwriters are my favourite particularly, or the most timeless ones that get mentioned all the time. they had some kind of backbone of theory and structure and a discipline to them.
And they can make that just appealing on any level without having to go,
Oh yes, I noticed there's a diminished sharp ninth in there.
like example I always example I'm going to say I always use, but you know, the chord sequence to Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic. Go and check out what chords are in that verse, because that's a weird song. But you never think about it when it's being played.
Oh man, those are my favourite ones. It's like the songs that aren't like... What I don't like, I tell you what I don't like, and people always... that's a lie, people don't always tell me this.
Yeah, that's the thing, like, you just got into the habit of saying, I always do this, people always tell me that. It's like, maybe told you once.
But a band I don't particularly care for, who I know are fantastic, I'm not at all knocking this band, is like a band like Snarky Puppy. You know that band?
I think I may have heard one of their albums.
But it's like a real musicians band. Musicians for musicians, like loads of crazy...
If you saw them live, you go, man, they're talented.
Yes, exactly. They're talented and they got these crazy time signatures and chords and everything, but for me, it doesn't do anything for me emotionally. And what does do something for me emotionally, it's like a middle ground between like Bob Dylan 3-chord songs and Snarky Puppy. It's like this thing where, like you said, with like ABBA or Queen or whoever it is, like these people who like, they write pop music that you can turn on the radio and hear it and go, oh, that's a great tune, but you look at the chords and you go, that's why it got me emotionally.
Yeah.
You know, because
like
it has something to it.
It's something a bit different.
And the difference thing, I think, isn't... it's not a case of, like, oh, look how different we are, look how... It's like, the point of that stuff is that it makes you feel a certain thing. It's a trick. Like, with music, we have two tools, really. It's the sound and the time of the song. And if you can give people a sound where they go, what was that? You're doing a good job. That's all I mean. It's not like you're some kind of morally superior person. It's just a cooler thing to hear.
Yeah, just to like say again, as we always say, you can just write a good 3-chord song and have some great lyrics. There's loads of punk that's like that. That's, you know, considered very, very good.
Totally.
That doesn't mean that's all you can do. You can stick complicated chords in there, but just if it makes everything work.
Yeah.
How did we get onto this topic?
I don't know, but I like it. This is all great.
Like when we eventually do like a vinyl and whiskey episode, this is like what it's going to be like.
I hope so.
Yeah, that will be fun. We are going to have to arrange one of those, just like in the downtime or something.
I'd like that. Would be nice. But no, that was a great little tear we had there. I think I've described the song I wrote.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward, really.
I don't think I've got anything else to add, but I do really like that. Like,
Thank you.
It's sort of separated up very cleanly in the sense of, like, you know when the chorus has kicked in. Like, you do run into a risk sometimes of just listening to a song and you're just waiting for the chorus to kick in. It's been 3 minutes and it's ended. It's like, oh, okay. All the bits are in there and you have to think, okay, so that was that. But, yeah, it's just really nicely structured and really well built.
Thank you.
And a great melody.
Well, that's the thing I like about, and this will be my last point on my song, but that's the thing I like about 50s rock and roll, or 50s like doo-wop or what have you, or that sort of thing, is the chorus and the verses are very well defined. You know when each thing ends and begins, and I think there's a certain accessibility to that.
Yeah, say what you like about 12-bar blues, but you know where you are structurally with it.
Yeah, you know where it's going to fall back to the one. Yeah, but that's pretty much all I can say about my song this week.
Well, that was really nice.
Thank you.
Cool. So, I have a song this week. It is called Shape My Days. This is how it goes, hopefully. I've drawn a line between my good and my bad days. Let them out. It's kept me around. All I need is a letter to numb me out. I started feeling, begin to read, give me a reference to myself. Drop me a line if you think this is trying for yourself. I wanted to feel it. I wanted proper responses. Maybe that's to waste my time away. You know I've only been laughing at the memories, moments shape my days. told some lies to myself and to others, keep me here. I don't know why, I don't have things to cover, draw me near. I don't think I felt it. Maybe I think that it works in the long run, but I may be wrong. Sheltered away from the heat of the hot sun for so long. I don't think I felt it. I wanted proper responses, not merely looking to waste my time away. You know I've only been laughing at the memories, moments shape my days. I started to feel it. Guess I've been waiting, savior or Satan, for some force to act on me. I wanted proper responses, not merely looking to waste my time away. You know I've only been laughing at the memories, moments shape my days. I've drawn a line between my good and my bad days, lock them out.
Great. Really good song. I like that.
Cheers. I was making some of those words up because I cannot read my own writing.
That's great. It's probably my favourite of yours from this run so far.
Oh, thank you.
And you're welcome.
Sorry. I just like being a dick.
And the bit I like the most is the bit where it's on a A sharp chord there, and it goes up to, it's like a bridge part before it resolves. You know what I mean?
What the...
Yeah. Love
well,
it. It's great.
Well, the way that came about is, it's diminished chords again. But I wanted this week to sort of try and write a song without any weird chords in it, like to be completely diatonic. So, a long story of how I got to that chord, but I'll just keep on with it. I was just wanted to write something in E flat, just because I like that key scale, because I can push up to F if I really need to, and make myself sound really clever within that context. And I was just hammering on that for ages. Like you said before, like if you're stuck for something, just hammer on your root.
If you run out of fun, go to the one.
I'm going to nick that for future use. But yeah, just trying to come up with something for that. Ended up with that, which for those of you who can't tell what those are, so that's the middle of a B flat chord. So that's if you imagine a barred B flat, that's the D, G, and B. Move your essentially E flat major 7, and then to a G minor. So I had that for something, and then that's just an F minor moving with a D and an E flat on it, moving up to an A flat doing the same thing. Originally that was a bit different. That was going to be so that was on the F, moving from C to D, and then on the A flat from D to E flat. So that's how that developed. I thought it sounded nicer, just keeping that constant. And I realised, well, I haven't really done a fully fledged 5 in this song at all. So I think for the chorus, that'd be just quite nice to suddenly go to the... because then you're instantly waiting for it to resolve to the 1.
Yeah.
So for a long time, when I say a long time in the context of writing the song, I wrote it in the last 2 days. So for about an hour, it was just, you know, I've always been wanting. Another bit of melody.
I'm so glad you added the extra bit.
So am I. Because I thought, well, I want some development. So I thought, for that, there was a C minor in between those.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
Something.
Yeah. But it sort of felt you're taken away from the power of that 5.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, if I'm staying diatonic, what does a diminished chord sound like? Because, yeah, I just thought that sounds pretty dope. So I put that in.
That's great. It's cool that it was like a... Sorry to interrupt, but it's cool that it was a last-minute decision because it's such a signature part of the song, in my head, anyway.
Well, it enabled me to create that melody because I had no idea what I was going to do for the second half of that. And then I got to... And I thought, well, I can push an F, so I can just reach the top note of that. So the melody for that was like... So the melody for that was like... Which is then like running down the diminished.
Yeah.
To resolve on the 3rd.
That's great.
Yeah, so that... And that main melody, which I screwed up a couple of times because I'm not the best singer in the world, but it was just based on like strumming around with that E flat. What I'm doing with that is it's 1 on D, 3 on G, 4 on B. So it's like a D shape but without the 3rd in it. But I was sort of, when I was like just strumming on that, I was originally just going between major and minor. Major 7 and major. I can't talk today. But just... That was a part of it for ages, and then it just developed to... Which informs the melody, because the melody is then just...
Yeah. It's a lovely thing this song does a lot, which I think gives it such a flavour, is it has so many cool suspensions where you add a note, take a note off to a particular chord, and it creates this lovely sort of like Blondie-esque punk rock feel to me.
I'm so glad you said Blondie. That's not where I would have put the song, but I'm glad to know that you think it comes there. But yeah, it's one of the things when you're limited to writing diatonically, you can either really focus on the melody, or you can like put loads of suspensions in there to create an interesting chord sequence, which will then hopefully suggest a melody with more movement. The only different bit is the bridge, which was just starting on the F minor, and I thought we haven't really done anything with the low, because that's the only G minor in there. We haven't really done anything with that, so it just ends up being...
Yeah.
Which is just putting the G bass on top of that F minor chord, taking away the 3rd. So...
That's a lovely movement.
But then that works quite nicely. I've only literally just realised this as I'm speaking to you now. But you've got the F minor to that sort of G chord to C minor, which is the first part of that bridge. So it's like you've got 4, 5, 1.
Yeah.
So you've moved essentially to the minor scale for the bridge, and then back to major for the chorus. I had no idea I'd done that.
Huh.
But yeah, that bridge is just C minor with B flat in the bass, with A flat in the bass, and then just A flat, which leads you quite nicely into that bit. So that's how the chords came about for that.
Very well constructed, the whole thing. It's great. It's really cool chord work, especially with the fact that you wrote diatonically and you still managed to get something that isn't easily recognizable. You know, usually when you write, not you, but usually when one person writes diatonically, you can kind of go, yeah, I can kind of see what's going on here. But with that, I think it's partly because of your suspensions and partly because you're writing in E flat. It's like it's harder to sort of gauge where you are in terms of the Roman numeral numbers of the scale.
Well, this is a beautiful thing about being a Queen fan. If you learn any of their songs, particularly the piano songs, you tend to end up playing in A flat, B flat, or E flat.
Right.
So that I started on piano first, and then I moved over to guitar. So that's factored into, like, I'm not the best at soloing in like E flat or B flat or A flat, but I can do it reasonably comfortably.
Sure.
Whereas I know, like, the minute you go from E minor to E flat minor, I know a lot of people just suddenly can't handle that.
Yeah.
Whereas you're like going, they go. And everyone's going like, but I don't know, I don't understand.
Yeah.
It's not on the dots.
It's not on the dots.
And yeah, but my goal in writing diatonically was to try and do like a bit of a Dave Grohl effect, where when he writes diatonically, he doesn't necessarily stick to like 1, 4, 5, 6. Because if you look at chord sequences like times like these, D, A minor, C to E minor, and then for the chorus, it's not a standard chord sequence, but it's standard chords. Mm-hmm. Same thing with My Hero. It's just C sharp minor to E, and then A to E. It doesn't actually use the fifth in that song at all. Which is interesting.
Yeah, it's unusual to not use the 5 because it's such a pivotal chord. You know, it usually takes you to the 1.
Yeah, but that was my goal. I was like playing a load of Dave Grohl songs and just thinking like, well, I really want to try and come up with something simple, but that doesn't sound like anything else. And I'm very glad that you sort of said that.
Yeah, no, I think you achieved it big time. So, can you think of anything to say about the lyrics that you'd like to say?
Yeah.
As always, no obligation on this show.
Well, it's fine. But yeah, this was a theme of last week's song, and I think song number 1. But I have had the feeling of being stuck in a rut for a while. And so a lot of my songs this run will probably be reflections on that. I'm just warning you now. Don't expect me to suddenly like cheer the fuck up next week or anything. But I was just like, it was like the last day before, the last free day I had to try and write the song. I was having a bit of a good day, got a new phone, got all my chores done nice and early, like done the washing up and put the clothes on the dryer and everything. That's all going to be fine. Watching a few Hitchcock films, so they're great. And then I realised I had a letter waiting for me. And I'm not going to try and make this too much of a sob story, but basically in November I was attacked at work. And, a guy got arrested for it, and I had to make, witness statement, all of that. Mm. Not a great day, but I can laugh about it. It's all fine. I'm still here, essentially.
Yeah.
No one died, no one got hurt. And I basically just received a letter saying, oh yeah, well, this is actually going to a hearing now. So these are the details and everything. I thought, I was having such a nice day as well. Which is why that's basically just the first verse. I've drawn a line between my good and my bad days, locked them out. It's kept me around, and all I need is a letter to knock me out.
Right. I was wondering what the letter line was about. Because you could have put another 2-syllable word there if you were talking more broadly about something that could bring you back to a negative space. I was like, why is it a letter? And now I know.
Now you know. Which is then like part 2 of that verse as well. I started to read, it gives me a reference to myself.
All right.
So it'll say like, oh, this was done like that. He assaulted this person, etc., etc. And Yeah, there's always like a little line like, oh, if you need anyone to talk to at this period, like, do give us a call and everything. Drop me a line if you feel this is testing for yourself. And then the last two lines of the second verse are basically just repeats of the themes from last week, like locked in my room away from the sun and the heat and everything. And then sort of that thing where, do you ever like catch yourself in conversation? Maybe lying's too strong a word for it, but like exaggerating stories.
Oh yeah, we all do that.
Yeah, we all do it to a degree, but like you'll have the thing of like you'll nearly hit something on the road. You'll all be fine. It'll just be a momentary thing. Maybe the driver will give you a funny look. And then by the end of the week, it's going, yeah, he was coming out of nowhere. And then when he drove off, he gave me the finger. Like, kind of thing like that. Like,
Yeah.
You always exaggerate these stories to make yourself either seem more impressive or, you know...
More victimised or
more
something.
Victimised, yeah, that was the word I was looking for. So that's just what that's about.
I like that. Yeah, we definitely all do that. And then sometimes that's a good component in a song, because if you tell the events exactly how they happened, sometimes it's not as poetic or grandiose as they could be if you, lyric it up.
But then the bridge is just about waiting for, well, it's literally the last line. I guess I've been waiting for some force to act upon me, waiting for a saviour or Satan. Like, I quite enjoy life when I've got something good acting upon me, or like everything's going to shit.
Right.
Like, I don't enjoy it at the time, but I enjoy it retrospectively because I then have things to do.
Yes.
And I enjoy wasting that time. Like, the amount of time when I was trying to move up to Bristol, I spent just watching video essays on YouTube is insane. But then the core... I'm really going in depth. I never do this.
This is good. This is an inside look at Declan Kitchener, folks.
Yeah.
That's good.
We were calling last week a therapy session. But one thing that sort of stuck with me a little bit, when the police came back to my workplace a week after the attack happened, it was me and two other people. And basically, we were, because no one had died, nothing had been stolen, nothing was damaged, and, the guy had been caught and apprehended and everything. We were all just joking about with it. Like, it made the end of the week fun kind of thing. Like,
right.
We should have a shotgun behind the till just in case this happens again. Like, doing silly little things like that.
Yeah.
And it just, I think the police officer who was there, she sort of said, oh, it's good to see that you're joking about this, because some people may not, and it's, it's perfectly natural to feel down and everything, but we were just like joking around, laughing our asses off about it. So that's why the lines of this one are, I wanted proper responses, not merely looking to waste my time away. I've only been laughing at the memories, moments that shape my days.
It's great. It's one of those ones where, like, again, kind of like we were talking about before, where like you can hear a set of lyrics and you kind of put your own stuff onto it. You can't help but do that, when you hear a set of lyrics. But then when you explain the events that led up to this set of lyrics and how and what pertains to them, you get a much clearer thing of like, oh, the letter. That actually is a real letter that existed, that sort of thing.
Well, it's like we were saying before, it can just be metaphorical. I could have literally just said I made all of this up, and it would still be as valid as it is otherwise. But seeing as I asked you this question about my lyrics in the first week of this podcast, did you put any particular meaning on them beforehand? Because you were sort of saying you read into them a little bit.
This section of the show, eh?
Yeah.
What does Roger think of
the lyrics mean? Well, because you were sort of saying you were putting your own thoughts on it and you were questioning some aspects of it. So what were you thinking when you were...
Well, it's always very vague, because it's always a first listen. It's literally the first time I heard the song.
Yeah, like you can only have like room for one or two comments unless like you've literally got one chord and all we've got to listen to is the words.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I basically thought it was so it's kind of, what I'm about to say is kind of coloured by what you've said, because you've just told me what the song's about, so it's kind of hard to go back to the place of like listening then. But I thought it was kind of about what last week's song was about to some extent, just like...
Well, like I said, there's elements of that in there. That's the second verse.
I thought it was about sort of you coming from Cornwall and then separating those days in Cornwall from your days in Bristol, something to do with that as a general topic. But it's kind of more late last year to this year, I suppose, that line that you drew, is it?
Now that you say that, I can see that.
Huh, okay.
Because, I mean, whenever you move to somewhere else, you literally can't help but build a little bit of a barrier between places.
Of course.
Like, you know, I'm a different person when I'm at home with my parents and in my hometown, just because, you know, I grew up there. I spent quite a lot of time getting known as a certain kind of person there, if you know, just, you know, because people have seen you grow up through the years and everything. All your old friends will have come from there. There'll be certain expectations of you.
Yeah.
Same thing if I was to probably go back to High Wycombe where I went to university, I'd probably be quite a different person again. Compared to where I am now in Bristol. So I can see where you're coming from. It's really interesting. I should write a song about that.
I think it's really cool sometimes where, I'm not saying this is what happened with yours, but where I'll write a song about something, like a particular time, like I could tell you on the podcast, it's about this thing that happened to me. And then later on in the year, I can listen to it and go, oh my God, there's actually elements of what happened the previous year in this song. Or at least that's how I read it now. Sometimes I address things without really meaning to.
Well, it's kind of a benefit of writing emotional, like we were saying earlier, writing emotional truths is that it can be applied to different situations. I mean, I could have wrote that song just going, I was attacked and the guy was arrested by the cops. And, you know, it would be...
It fits.
I was struggling so hard to make that last bit for that. But yeah, that's very specific.
Yeah.
And there are writers who can write very specific things that I really love. Like I mentioned it before, James Vetkolodi from Defavana. He can write ultra specific lyrics. And they've still got an emotional truth that brings out to everybody. But that's not necessarily what that's about. That's about the emotion of just realising good days, bad days, lying between things. And that's, I think, not to say that I'm thinking about, oh, it's got to be mainstream, it's got to be this, that, the other. Because I never think like that. But it just feels a bit more something that I could convey, if that, something specific to me, but that can be felt by other people.
Oh, absolutely.
If that makes sense.
Well, it makes perfect sense to me because that's what my song's like. I mean, my song's about specific things that happen to me, but I'm not going to spell them out because, A, it's not very good. Like you said, with the cops came and stuff, like, those aren't as good lyrics as the metaphorical interpretation of those events.
Yeah, it's not true emotionally because the song's not about being attacked. It's about being reminded of what we might term bad days.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and then also, I mean, the other great thing about that is because you're not writing the cops came and this happened specifically, other people can now listen to that song and go, oh man, I've been having a bad period where I want to separate this period from the previous period and draw a line. And then because it's vague enough lyrically, they can do that. Whereas if it was specifically about your experiences, they'd be like, I don't know, I can't really put myself into this.
Yeah, that's the thing. Anyone who's listened to this podcast now can't have that experience.
Right, yeah. That's copyright.
It's kind of the thing, like, once you explain something, you can't see it any other way sometimes. Like, there's that famous story of everyone thinks Every Breath You Take is a love song, and Sting has said many, many times, like, no, it's a song about stalking someone, read the lyrics.
Right.
And then you sort of, once you get that in your head, you think, oh yeah, that is kind of messed up.
Yeah. There are a few of those songs, and I think they garner attention for good reason, because it's kind of like what we were talking about before, like a song is emotionally resonant for the reason that it sounds sweet or it sounds sad, but then the lyrics can be something else, and sometimes people will focus quite a lot on the lyrics or vice versa, and when the two kind of are at odds with each other, people are like, oh my god, did you hear what that song's actually about?
Yeah, you can make that beautifully, like, clear and effective with emotional, that emotional dissonance between what you're feeling and what you're hearing. I'm trying to think of a specific example.
Yeah, I was trying as well. I couldn't think of a
But comedy songs tend to be quite good about that. Like, for example, Inflatable You by Tim Minchin. It's very classy. It's got loads of sixth chords. It's on the piano in a jazz style. It's about a blow-up porn doll. And, you know, because it's a comedy song, it works at creating that emotional distance, but you can use that in an inverted commas serious context as well.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons, like, again, unfortunately, no specific examples, but, like, I think something that does quite well on YouTube, for example, is when somebody takes, like, a well-known song, a happy song, and they put sad chords underneath it, and people go, oh, it's the sad version, because what the chords you put underneath something change the emotional tone of it. It's like, one thing I'm not a huge jazz fan, but one thing I love about jazz is a reharmonization. Like, they could take Happy Birthday or Somewhere Over the Rainbow, for example, and there's a guy who does this on YouTube, it's great, and, like, they'll show you what the real chords are, the diatonic chords, and they'll go, well, I'm going to change the 4 for diminished whatever, and it changes the whole tone of the song, the emotional resonance of the song.
Well, there's a semi-famous story of the Sherman Brothers when they were writing the music for Mary Poppins. Originally, Chim Chimney Chim Chiroo was very, like, sort of Slavic. It was kind of like a folk song, but like a Hungarian folk song or something. If you listen to the original demo, it's a bit more clearer, but then they sort of reharmonized the bass to make it sound like more like a English musical thing, and it really worked. And it then became the standout song of the film, arguably.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of like where the fun of it comes in. I think you know, I don't know if anybody else knows this, but I've done some hip hop production, and one thing I kind of learned from that, which was really cool, is like if you take even something like, because I've done remixes like Wu-Tang Clan or whatever, or Notorious B.I.G.
A lot of these tend to end up on your winter tapes, don't they?
Yeah, and when you remix them, like if you listen to the original of, like, say for example, Notorious B.I.G.'s Juicy or something, it's all kind of like based on one chord, you know, just like one repetitive loop, like a lot of hip hop is, which is cool. And then, but if you kind of like remove the beat and keep the a cappella, and then you put piano chords underneath, like the different lyrics in the song will take on different emotional meaning, depending on which chord you put underneath. And I think that's kind of a cool songwriting thing to learn, is that you can change how a certain word feels. Like you could say, you know, tomato ketchup in a song and put it under like a really sad minor 4 chord, and it'll sound really sad. Now, how stupid is that? It's tomato ketchup. It shouldn't be a sad topic.
So I just can't help.
You want to do it now?
Ketchup, 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 ketchup. Are you here to solve my ketchup problem?
It's weird though, isn't it?
It is a bit, yeah. But it's once you learn that, it's kind of like you think, oh wow, I can, you know, that's so useful. I can use it in so many different contexts. Because I know I've written songs in the past on the podcast where you have a melody, like, but then you can change the chords under that to have really different meanings. So, for example, you could do, I don't lie between my good and my bad days. Sort of. It's not necessarily better, but it does change how you feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a cool thing to play around with. Yeah, I suppose that's kind of a good... If I could talk to younger me, songwriter, I'd go, that's a good tip. Just like try playing songs you already know and like by other people, but change the chords and like see what happens if you put a different note for the bass in the root of the chord, or change that major to a minor. It probably won't work most of the time, but sometimes you'll get these really weird results.
Well, changing up the bass notes is one of our favourite little tricks, particularly when we're on the piano.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're better at that than I am. I generally tend to stick to either roots or fifths of the chords I'm playing.
I was going to say, you tend to play 1 and 5 as the bass of a chord on the piano. I tend to play like an octave.
Yeah.
Which probably makes it a wee bit easier.
Well, you have bigger hands than I do. I think that's really one of the main reasons. I can do an octave, but it hurts.
That's the thing. The reason why I do that is because when I was starting out on piano, I wanted to play loads of Queen songs.
Yeah.
And all the piano sheets that I found online had the bass in octaves.
Right.
So when I was only learning Queen songs, I just got into that habit to the
Right.
point where I can sort of do things like Death on Two Legs, so bass riff on that in an octave on my left hand.
Right, right.
I'm not the speediest person ever, but it's gotten to be a habit that I just impart that to every other song that I do now.
Yeah.
Or I sometimes use it for effect. Like I think there's I can't remember what episode it was, but the only ones I wrote on piano, where I just use verse 1, or pause is a good example of this as well, where verse 1 will be single note bass, verse 2 is octave note bass, and you've suddenly got a bit more oomph to it.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing because you tend to incorporate parts of your playing from your early days, that like you have formative years as a player or as a writer.
Yeah.
And but having said that, when I'm recording piano, because like I say, I can't really do the octaves with my left hand so well, but if I'm overdubbing piano, I'll usually overdub a lower octave for piano because you get that thicker sound, don't you? And it's
Yeah.
almost theatre-esque in a sense.
It's almost sort of like a honky tonk, because a honky tonk is sort of the equivalent of a 12-string guitar. Almost,
Yeah,
in, like,
yeah.
it's got the higher overtone there. So it's almost like having a 12-string guitar.
Wait, is a honky tonk like if you press one note, does it play different octaves of that note but with just one note? Because that would be a cool instrument if that isn't what it is.
It isn't what it is. I think it's just got more harmonic overtones. Bear in mind, I'm not like an expert or anything. I have no idea what makes a honky tonk different to a piano, but I always feel that you get a more like harmonic richness from a honky tonk,
Yeah, I
as
feel
opposed
like
to a
that
piano,
too.
which is very pure.
But how cool would that be? I wonder if that exists. Like you hit a note, and then because of the 3 strings on a piano,
Let's patent it.
one's like an octave lower, one's the regular note, and one's like a high like mandolin string type of thing. How cool would that be?
Tell you what would be kind of cool is if you had like an extra pedal. So like your default is like you've got your note and your higher octave because they don't tend to get in the way too much.
Yeah.
And then you can press that pedal for special occasions to add like the lower octave.
And like the
in.
lower strings come up when you press the pedal. And
Yeah.
you go, that'd be well good.
Jesus, the amount of engineering that would be needed to make this piano work would be insane, but we should do it.
I was at this when I was in Wales. I went to this like antique shop, and there was this instrument there. It was like a zither but smaller. I don't know what it was called, but like it had 4 strings, a collection of 4 strings, and then a gap, and then another collection of 4 strings, and each thing was a chord, and then each of these 4 strings would have this thick bass note, and then 3 ones doing like the right hand of the piano, like the triad of a major chord or a minor chord, and it was kind of like an auto harp, but it had this great sound when you plucked it because you got the low note as well. So something like that on a piano would be really cool to have.
That would be pretty cool. Because that's what kind of one thing I do miss about having to do these entirely on guitar now, is that it's more difficult to get that bass experience, or sort of like having contrary motion or different things together.
Yeah.
Because just by the physical limitations of a guitar, unless you tune down,
Yeah.
that's your lowest note,
Yeah.
which is nowhere near the lowest note on the piano. You
Exactly.
may not necessarily need to go down there, but it's
Yeah.
nice to be able to.
I mean, but I completely agree, and I miss that too. But having said that, what I found is because I demo my songs a little bit more broadly than just like acoustic guitar in front of the mic, like we play on the podcast.
Well, you do it properly and I don't.
Well, only because I have the means to. But one thing I've noticed is if I can write a song which I feel is like structurally sound and like has good chordal movement to it, once I add in a bass line, it just comes alive because it's been missing that all this time.
Well, this is something that we sort of found when we've been recording my songs before, because what we've tended to do these are the recordings you can find on my SoundCloud, but what we've tended to do is just I play the song roughly on either an acoustic guitar or piano, but to a click track, and then I put the drums on. But because I'm not the greatest drummer in the world, it ends up sounding a bit sloppy and a bit uneven, and not necessarily as professional as you might hope. Apart from that one time that you played drums on a song and it was fucking awesome. There's a lot of swearing in this episode. But the minute you put the bass in there, it all gels together.
That's quite unique to you though, in the sense of like, well, I've only ever produced myself and you, produced in inverted commas. Anyway, but the thing is, like with me,
I can play properly, so it's not an issue.
no, not at all, not at all. It's like I'll make sure, and we're getting into sort of like production jargon here, but like what I'll do quite often with like recording drums, if I'm going to record bass afterwards, is I'll make sure my kick drums all syncopate with where generally the bass notes are going to be. Whereas when I recorded you playing drums for your songs, you had a different approach where you'd have kick drums kind of doing their own thing, and I was like listening to you going like, I wonder how this is going to work with the bass, and I was like, I don't know. And then you put the bass down, and the bass was in different syncopated places to where the kick drum fell.
Well,
it still worked, and it even gelled a little better. And it was like one of those things where you see someone else working, and you get something else from it you wouldn't get yourself.
You steal their technique. But you know the reason why that is? It's because I'm one of the world's worst drummers. I can only do like a basic beat. Like I don't know how well this is going to come through, but I hope you can hear my foot stomping with that. But what I tend to do is I tend to play drums to a melody. So
yeah.
I'll have it like basic pattern, but I'll fix a melody around it, if that makes sense. So it's like, if you know my song The Plan, do 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 do, so like do 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 do, like it's it's played in time with the melody but not with the bass. So the bass sort of fills the space between that, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And it's funny because when you describe that, that's what I do too, in a sense. But it's like, again, I'm not a great drummer, but one thing I like about the drummer I'm working with at the moment, Hitty Sticks, is
he's amazing.
He'll do this great thing, which is sort of my approach to recording drums, which is basically like the melody of the song is kind of like the kick. I'm contradicting myself, I'm aware, but the melody of the song, the vocal melody, is like the kick will do that, but then the bass will kind of like, it all locks in, when it's done well, it locks in like a puzzle, and he's very good at kind of like being good. I can't.
He's good at being good.
He's good at my words are gone. Doing the vocal melody and the bass line in one drum beat, essentially, which is really cool. It just makes for such a nice production.
He is like really good, though.
He's insane.
We keep saying this every time that you mention him, but he is sensational.
I want to give him a plug, actually, just real quick. If you record and you're listening to this and you want like affordable, good drums, look up Hitty Sticks online. He does it all remotely. You send him a song and he sends like the most amazing rock or gospel drums back to you.
If you want to see how good he is, I'd recommend listening to something like Billy's Courage or The Groundhog Market.
Yeah.
Where they sort of shows off his variety and his ability to keep time, because no one can keep time to that Billy's Courage riff except you and him.
So yeah, it's the perfect combo. No, that was really cool.
And he plays all through next week in Munster if you want to give him a full-on listen. And he's got his own Instagram, Facebook. Does he have a YouTube page?
Oh yeah, he's got it all. He's like a social media wizard as well as being a fantastic drummer.
But yeah, check him out. He is good.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have anything else that you want to say about your song?
No, I think we left that topic of conversation behind a long time ago. No, nothing else to say about that one, but thank you for your comments on it.
Yeah, no, I really like it. It's great. So we actually have an email. We have a song which Simone Rochelle has sent in, and we're going to link her stuff down, her YouTube and Facebook and all that stuff.
All the fun stuff.
All the fun stuff in the description. So we're going to take a listen to Simone Rochelle's song, There Is No Cure. Here it is.
The warmth of your smile, just one more breath before you have to go, but I'll be there sooner than you know. Oh yes, I will. And help me, where do I go from here? And help me I'll be there sooner than you know. But I'll be there sooner than you know. But I'll be there sooner than you know.
There Is No Cure by Simone Rochelle.
Oh, that is really good. What I quite like is that it is a very limited chord sequence, but it's almost hypnotic, and it doesn't matter because you've got that powerful voice there.
Yeah.
It sort of gets you in a trance, so that when you get to the "Help Me" bit where it's just changing the chords,
Yeah,
up,
I like that bit.
it sort of brings you up to it and sort of like makes you realise sort of how focused in you've become.
Definitely, it's a very like it's one of those mixes I really like. That's just two well recorded things together. You know, a lovely guitar sound and a lovely vocal, and like you say, you do kind of get drawn in. I kind of like the whole time we listened to the song, I was just kind of like staring and listening, and it's great. It's really immersive, and that's that's a compliment. It's great.
Not necessarily flashy because you feel it's lacking something. It's just what needs to be there is there.
Exactly.
And what needs to be there isn't necessarily a lot.
Exactly, and I wouldn't like to speculate about what the song is about, but I imagine it has some kind of emotional weight for Simone, and I think if it had like, you know, chords and diminished and jazz chords all over the place, it kind of wouldn't have the same resonance as it does.
Well, sort of a counterpoint to the things we were saying earlier, like if you it's kind of the argument that your song this week was sort of based around. If you're going back to just simple chords in that sort of diatonic way, you feel a sort of responsibility to be a bit more truthful in whatever sense that is, whether that's truthful in writing the best melody you can or truthful in putting out an emotion that's a bit closer to you than you may normally do.
Definitely, I think there is a certain vulnerability to writing a song about something that is vulnerable for you lyrically, and then kind of accompanying that with something that is a lot more sort of bare bones, chordally, just kind of going, here's my message, here's what it is, you know?
Yeah, it's difficult to do, but it can be done.
Yeah, and I was saying to Declan while it was playing, what an amazing vibrato Simone has.
Oh yeah, that is a
That
voice.
lovely wide vibrato. It's just amazing. Kind of reminds me of like Karen Carpenter or something like that.
I can see that,
But yeah,
But
absolutely fantastic.
but it's very powerful. It's very cool.
Yeah, anyway, thanks for sending that in, Simone. Much appreciated. And yeah, like I say, we'll link all our stuff down in the description.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Do you want to wrap up them?
Cool. So that's about it for this episode of the Weekly Song Podcast. If you've liked what you've heard, give us a comment on SoundCloud or maybe like a 5-star review on iTunes or something. Or you could leave us a 4-star review or a 3-star review or a 2-star review.
But you don't want to go and do that.
You could leave us a 1-star review if you're feeling particularly cruel. And if you want to message the show, if you've got a song that you've written in a week, or it doesn't necessarily have to be in a week, but if there's a song that you've written that you want to send in and hear us talk about on air, send it to weeklysongpodcast@gmail.com. Where can they find you, Roger?
They can find me on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, all just search Roger Heathers. And I have a new album out at the moment.
It's
called
really good.
Next Week in Munster, and it's on Spotify and iTunes and stuff. But if you want to buy it, you can buy it from rogerheathers.com.
It features a fair few of the songs that were written in the last season of the show and maybe a little before that as well. But it's really good.
Thank you. Where can they find you?
Well, they can find me basically on SoundCloud. If you if you're on SoundCloud and you see who Weekly Song Podcast is following, I'm in there. I think that's basically about it.
And we got some fully produced versions of some of your weekly songs from the earlier series too.
Yeah, not many of them, but they're there and they're good. Thank you, Roger. We also have a Weekly Song Podcast Facebook page, which we're trying to use more. I think it's mostly you that's using it.
We should both like jump into that and just like share as much as we can.
I've been so tempted to try and put song demos up before, but the trouble is that it'll be as I'm writing them. And there's
Yeah.
the thing, like, you may not notice what it is. Like, week 4 writing demo. Oh, I wonder what this is. This is spoilers.
Yeah.
We also have a Instagram, which you have really been taking the reins up on, which is quite nice.
Yeah, we got stories, pictures, videos. That's it, because that's all you can do on Instagram. But you should go and give us a follow. It's our Weekly Song at Weekly Song Podcast on Instagram.
Maybe one day I could put like a silly picture on there that's got nothing to do with anything. But yeah, that's it for this week. See you next time. Ta-ra.
Ta-ra.